Okay. Movement. Everything is in motion. My heart's beating quite quickly at the moment, perhaps quicker than normal. My brain is trying to fire little electrical signals so I can remember what I'm supposed to say, and I'm pacing the stage on a world that's spinning on its axis at the same time as orbiting the sun, hurtling through space. Everything's in motion. Life is growing. Plants are sucking up moisture from the ground. That moisture's running up through their stalks or trunks to their leaves. There it transpires and moves up as water vapor through the atmosphere. It collects on little particles of dust and is blown around the world on trade winds, eventually coming back down to Earth as rain or snow. And then it runs off the landscape into rivers, pulling material with it down into the sea, where it deposits that, which will eventually become rock in this endless cycle of all these interconnected networks and systems and cycles. So, I should have been on that slide while you're doing that. This is a photograph of the full moon reflected on water. The water's undulating. So it's actually an image of light from the sun bouncing off the moon, then back to Earth, all of this in motion at the same time, and then on the surface of the water. It's just a long exposure image that captures this path of the moon. And here we have a tree drawing. The tree is actually drawing with a pen attached to the tip of its branch. As it moves in the wind, it's tracing out its path. This is a hawthorn busy at work. So it's not a representation of the tree. The drawing isn't a representation of the tree. In a way, it's the tree kind of laying down its own essence, describing its structure and its movement. And a hawthorn tree is a very stiff, rigid tree. It's a spiky tree. And it produces this very tight, scratchy drawing. Whereas an oak tree, a long sort of branch, will produce a much more fluid drawing. In a way, they're much like signatures. They're about the trees themselves and their structure and characteristics. Here we have a drawing that was made by a weeping willow tree. It had 100 pens attached to its branches, and it drew over 4 hours as it moved in the wind. And these segments were arranged around the trunk in a circular formation. And it's really important to me that people understand how the work's been made. It's not just about the drawings. It's about the process that's gone on, that action taking place with this tree working away. And so they're always shown either with a video or with photographs, so you understand instantly when you see it how the work's been made. Now, a lot of my work explores the natural world, but other works also explore the man-made world. And this is one piece from a body of works that were postal works. And I had the idea to make works that were produced on their journey through the post. So initially, I made these very simple boxes, and you place a blank piece of paper inside, close the lid, and there's a drawing mechanism, which, as the box travels through the post, produces this drawing. So it's about letting external factors guide the work and direct it. And I don't know how that drawing is going to turn out. The collector or the gallery is the first person to see that work. But with this one, I guess all of my work's a little bit playful. With this one, it was slightly more mischievous, if you like. And you can just make out, hopefully, a little glint where those edges are folded over of the box. And that's because inside there's a camera. You have 2 cameras, actually, in this one, both looking out in opposite directions. There's also a timer circuit, power packs, GPS, and a sound recording device. And it's obviously a little bit bomb-like. But I would take this box to my local post office, and I guess it makes the action of posting a letter a little more nervous than normal, a little more of an anxious act, as I've got this box, which actually makes a slightly audible tick every 12 seconds when those cameras are triggered. And so it's taking these images as it travels through the postal system. And in a way, I see it as this little Mars rover, I guess, my own Mars rover, that I send out into a system to which I have no access. You know, we post a letter, you don't know what goes on as this letter's traveling or parcel's traveling through the post. And I wanted to explore that, to reveal this hidden world. And from its very own perspective, it's not a human being taking these images, it's a parcel. The parcel's on the floor or in a trolley or upside down sometimes. And I like these little moments that it captures, little moments in time, snapshots, which to me, some of them were very special. Of course, there was lots of black and darkness, but it took 20,000 images, I forgot to say that, of its journey. So a lot of images there. So this is another piece. They were called Windwalks, this body of work. And I had the idea, I guess a romantic idea, that I could walk wherever the wind took me and just see what happened. And it would be this very free process. And so I designed this little wind vane and set off on Dartmoor, this sort of wilderness area in England, following this vane. Sadly, this one didn't really work very well, because what happened was that the wind vane's in the shadow or the lee of my body. And so as I'm walking, I'm affecting it. And it constantly kept going around in circles, so I'm going around in circles. So we ended up with this very sort of wiggly, not a very productive walk. So I had to find a way of designing it where I didn't affect it, where somehow it, you know, my body wasn't making any difference. And this wasn't an attempt to be a crazy, eccentric Englishman. It was a logical decision to place it on my head. And so I had a helmet with a stainless steel pivot and this carbon fiber structure with this sail at the front that was counterbalanced at the back with a bullet camera recording video and some little weights. And it was perfectly balanced. So if I got to a road or something, I could turn my head, look each way, no cars coming, and it wouldn't change, it wouldn't move. I couldn't in any way affect what this arrow was doing, but I would walk simply following this arrow wherever it took me, trying to stay as one, like some kind of dowser, I guess, you know, following a water path or something, staying as one with this arrow. And if it would point at a wall, I'd have to wait. And it starts to move this way, and I'd move along, or back that way. So there were some frustrating moments, I guess. But here I'm walking down the embankment. I made the walks in London. Some were made in the countryside. But this series were made in London. And I'm walking down the embankment. It was in the early hours, so I could walk very freely through the city. And for me, it was a very interesting way of exploring the city. A city I thought I knew really well, certainly some areas, but ended up being taken down these back streets and alleys and finding these really amazing little hidden places that I never knew existed. So a new way of exploring and seeing the city, and also understanding the wind and how it moves through our city. And very often I would find myself down the end of alleys, circling with plastic bags and leaves, just caught at a dead-end cul-de-sac. So all of those walks were plotted very accurately. And in this case, 7 walks from 7 dials. There was this drawing with these 7 paths all radiating out from the center, like some kind of spaghetti. And my meandering path, which, when it reaches a corner, would sort of get caught in eddies in the wind, produces these sort of sections that start to describe the city. They start to describe the city structure of blocks, buildings, and obstacles that I confront with my meandering, wiggly path. And in this case, here's the thing. Just here, I was actually an office building with security guards and these large glass-fronted lobby. And they constantly watched me walking back and forward in front of their windows and around their loading bays on their CCTV cameras. as I sort of drew out that perimeter of that building. So another piece that I guess there are lots of strands to my work. They all interconnect, weave together, but there are different strands. And I was invited to do a project, lead an artist walk. And I didn't want to lead people on a walk. That was kind of not what I did. So I decided to basically let the landscape describe and lead people's walks. So what we did is we set out, it was set, I should say, in this huge valley, an amazing kind of watershed that dropped down. This event was kind of set in the middle of it. And so we set out all these flags, these numbered flags you see, in the landscape at intervals just down from the watershed. And then people would walk downhill, basically as if they were water running off the landscape. So not looking, where's the bottom of the valley down there, I'll go there, but trying to look at the landscape immediately around them, to feel it. Okay, it drops down this way a little, and then this way. This is what water would be doing as it makes its way down that landscape towards the sea. So here, people slowly start to drop into folds in the landscape, coming together. This woman actually said she was having this most amazing kind of meditative walk, really tuning in with the landscape and very much enjoying just being by herself. And then after kind of an hour or so, she kind of realized that she hadn't seen anybody else and kind of wondered if she was off track and was going to, if she kept going, just sort of reach the sea, I guess, or something, you know. But I'd carefully worked out that everybody in this area would end up at this confluence of two rivers. So they drop down into these valleys and by the river and then end up walking along. And this is the drawing. So it's a drawing about the landscape and water running off that landscape, how water would move. But it's also a drawing about an action, an event that took place, and about the people doing it. So you've got this little detour here, which was a woman who felt a bit less physically able, and she didn't want to do that section, so she just decided to walk round. And then you've also got people who, rather than ability, was perhaps more about laziness, and they're cutting the corners of this meandering river. So it's a drawing about those people and that event that took place. This is the last piece I'm going to show you, and I was invited by City of Sydney to do a large project, an event that involved people. And I wanted to take these wind walks further, to move them out to a group of people. And so I kind of mass-produced, this is shot in the studio, mass-produced all these IKEA-style, slot-together helmet vanes that I simply carried out in a large box. And we did this event. These people have just set off from the public square. There were 50 people, all with these wind vanes on their head. And they all set off at the sound of a klaxon and start to disperse through the city. And as they spread in this kind of Brownian motion-like way, particles, some of them drifting down one street, some down another. And it was quite beautiful and very much a spectacle of all these people moving out, spreading through the city. You catch glimpses of them from all different points. And they weren't performers. They were just people who'd been invited to participate. They were given a brief introduction, a brief kind of training, if you like, in what to do. And they all moved out throughout the city. And, you know, like the wind, you know, people, it's changing, you can't control it. And that's one of the things that fascinates me about wind, you know, this whole idea that we can't see where it's come from, where it's going. We can see its effects, but we don't know. It's part of this much larger moving system. And here we got people, some of them following this very diligently. There was a Japanese girl who walked incredibly, sort of every twitch of this thing, she followed it. And she was exceptional. And then there was also another woman I saw quite a distance off, with the arrow pointing the wrong way, chatting to people who are sat outside a cafe at a table. And I was like, what's she doing? What's she doing? You know, but, you know, I've got to let go as well. That's part of what the thing's about. And, you know, I like to think that maybe she sort of finished that conversation sort of explaining what she was doing with this strange contraption on her head to her friends or strangers, and then said, I shouldn't be talking, I should be following this, I better go. Hopefully that's what she did. So, I mean, I guess some people could see this as, you know, all these people drifting out aimlessly through the city, not in control of where they go, guided by external forces, as some kind of deterministic or fatalistic kind of metaphor for contemporary life. For me, it's not like that. It's something much more playful and joyful. It's an exploration of the city and an exploration or an attempt to understand what the wind does, how it behaves, how it moves. And basically, it's also this opportunity for people to let go, to try and enjoy not being in control of everything, and to let other forces guide them, not be afraid of it, and sort of welcome the potential for the unknown that brings. And that's the end of my talk, really. Thank you, and merci.